So welcome everybody, we're live again from GAC 2024. I've got Tom from America's Credit Unions here. Tom, introduce yourself.
All right, I'm Tom Sakash. I'm the manager of Small Credit Union Initiatives at America's Credit Unions, formerly CUNA. Yeah.
And so talk about small credit unions. I mean, obviously there is a movement, they are part of the core of it, and yet they're unfortunately often merging away, and sometimes unnecessarily. So, what are you all doing to help support them and keep them alive and relevant?
Yeah, well, we're trying to do a lot, actually. It starts with our Small Credit Union Committee. So America's Credit Unions is an advocacy organization, and so we make sure that the small credit union voice is represented through our Small Credit Union Committee. It's a group of about 15 CEOs of small credit unions, ranging from asset size from 0 to about 100 million. And they just work to understand the issues, to try to identify how they affect small credit unions the most. And then they work to advocate on behalf of small credit unions and the industry overall. So this week at GAC, the committee met with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and the NCUA, and they did an outstanding job really making them understand, the regulators understand, how potential policies that they're considering are going to impact small credit union operations.
So as part of those advocacy efforts, what are the big topics that they're really hitting on with the regulators?
Yes, absolutely. So it's just starting with the CFPB overdraft.
Right.
So small credit unions and credit unions of all asset sizes, they use overdraft as a service to their members, services that keep their members from going to payday lenders, right? So if you offer overdraft as a credit union, your members have the ability to overdraft if they need it. And the other thing about credit unions is they really make sure that the member understands the service that they're using. It's all disclosed up front, and members then have the ability to overdraft a little bit if they're in a tight time. Without that service, if credit unions were stripped of that service, members might be forced to go to payday lenders and then go into the cycle of debt that would be really harmful to them. And so the committee really made sure to educate the CFPB about how the loss of that program would be very detrimental to the consumer health or the member's financial health. So that's a big one. And then when the committee met with the NCUA, they talked a lot about consumer protection. The NCUA has a new sort of focus on consumer protection. And again, the committee just wanted to make sure that they understood that new laws, or new rules, I should say, are going to disproportionately impact smaller credit unions. When you're smaller, a new rule is going to cost more to a smaller credit union than it will to a larger credit union because they don't have the scale to absorb those regulatory costs.
Yeah, which is really sad because these smaller credit unions, they're the ones, not that large credit unions aren't great too, but the smaller credit unions are often the ones who are in that community all the time and really serve a particular niche need. So, yeah, I think the efforts that you all are doing as far as the advocacy piece is great. What other kind of programs do you have outside of the GAC kind of focus?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, well, we put on conferences for small credit unions. This is something we've been doing for a number of years now. We really right-size the time and the price for smaller credit unions who don't often have time to get away from their shops and who often don't have the budget to attend big credit union conferences.
Right.
So we charge pretty low registration rates, and we try to locate them in places that are easily accessible to large groups of small credit unions. And then we have them typically from Sundays to Tuesdays, so they're usually just out of their office for maybe one day, maybe a day and a half. And they've been really effective in getting small credit unions together so that they can talk to each other, network, learn new ideas.
Right.
And we think it's a huge value that we've been providing.
Yeah.
The other thing we do is, in addition to sort of in-person events, we also have an online community for small credit unions. We have 1,500 members of that community. And these are small credit unions across the country who can network, talk to each other, ask for sample policies, ask for referrals for different business partners or vendors, anything as it relates to running a small credit union. And it's really fantastic for them to sort of have their peers nationwide as just a new resource for them, especially when you're smaller and you don't have a lot of in-house expertise.
Yeah, no, and that's great. One of the purposes, reasons I founded the Credit Union Connection was because smaller credit unions and often smaller business partners, they don't know that each other exists, and they can often work very well together, hand in hand.
Yeah.
because you know, a lot. If you're running a small credit union and you are the CEO and the loan officer and you know, occasionally fill in for a teller or whatever,
Yeah.
you don't have a chance. You don't have the time to go research like all the partners. So like
Yes,
having
great point.
a collection of you know, expertise among themselves is really great because they also understand each other's issues.
Very, very true. Yes, for sure.
Yeah. So with the merger, obviously, of CUNA and NAFCU, creating America's credit unions, do you know, I mean, I know it's kind of early on, but will there be changes to what you all are doing? Additions, subtractions, just differences?
Yeah. I mean, I think that you know, our support for small credit unions will continue strong, just as strong, if not stronger, without a doubt. I mean, that's kind of how we view the whole, you know, merger is, you know, taking things that we were doing really well and keeping those things and then building on them. So, you know, I don't see the small credit union conferences stopping or the community stopping. You know, I think we're going to continue to do those. But then we get all these great ideas and resources from our friends at NAFCU too. And so we're very excited about what this will mean for our support for small credit unions. And I think a very bright future for small credit union programming at America's Credit.
So very often, you know, one of the issues with credit unions, smaller credit unions emerging away is finding that new leadership, the new CEO, the new you know, board members who are vacating positions and then refilling those. What are the sorts of resources you all are offering for that?
Yeah, so you know, that's something that we are working on. So each year, our small credit union committee that I talked about, they work on a project to address a big challenge that are facing small credit unions. So this past year, they worked on business strategy for small credit unions, and they asked credit unions across the country to submit business strategies that have been effective for them in growing their organizations. We got 50 entries. It's about 170 pages of strategy for small credit unions. It was released this week at the Small Credit Union Roundtable at GAC. And so that was their big project. We're so excited to show small credit unions this resource because it's going to be awesome. But this next year, the committee is going to focus on talent because it is an existential challenge. It's one of the biggest challenges that they face. Having less scale and resources to be able to afford top talent at all levels of the organization is huge. So we're just starting to have those conversations about how we can help small credit unions with the talent challenge. Because, you know, at the end of the day, your credit union runs on your people. If you don't have good people, you know, it makes it a lot harder to be effective at what you do. So if we can help small credit unions with the talent issue, I think that's a great way to position them for success in the future.
Digital transformation only does so much, right?
Yeah, right.
You need the people, need the people. And so what else have you guys got going on as far as like programming for the rest of the year? Yeah,
so the other thing that we've been working on in partnership with CUNA Strategic Services, I don't know if they're going through a rebrand yet, but still called CUNA Strategic Services. They've been working to help us form buyers groups of small credit unions. So often it's difficult for a smaller credit union to access new technologies, partner with a business partner because of the costs. So we feel like if we can band a group of small credit unions together, maybe collectively negotiate a contract that might drive down those costs and make those services more accessible to those institutions. So they've been kind of helping us kind of figure out where to go first, you know, maybe which service might be most appropriate for that type of arrangement. But we think that would be another way to help small credit unions, you know, access technology or other services that they need to improve their member service.
And keep themselves relevant because, member service doesn't just happen in the branch, right? And, you know, if you're not getting in those newer, younger members, which I saw the other day, I mean, I remember 10, 15 years ago, credit union's average member age was about 47, now it's 53, and, you know, we were talking back then about we need to make them younger, and we went the opposite. So, if you don't have that technology to start with, like, people my age will adapt. My parents have adapted, you know, to banking online. But if you don't have it to start with, those young people aren't coming in the door, period, because they want your digital door.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and so, I like that. The digital piece is super important. So, any other initiatives you got for the small credit unions? Not that you haven't listed quite a few, just anything else that you might be offering?
Yeah, you know, I mean, I think a big part of what I feel like we can can do, especially at America's Credit Unions moving forward, and our singular focus on advocacy, is really continue to identify those areas that are pain points for small credit unions, and work with the NCUA in particular on how to address some of those things. We found that in our discussions with the NCUA that they're usually receptive to the challenges that small credit unions face. And the other funny thing is that small credit unions might be the ones that bring up an issue that's a pain point for them, that they think is just a pain point for them, but ends up being a pain point for larger credit unions. A great example of that is record retention rules. So right now, credit unions are required to keep a lot of documents, related to loan files and board meetings and so on and so forth. And there are so many records at this point, because a lot of these credit unions are old, that they're filling up their offices, and they're having to go out and rent storage lockers and storage garages to save all these records that they're being required to keep. Well, that's a problem for small credit unions. It's also a problem for large credit unions as well. I mean, think about the scale and the scope of records that they are forced to keep. And so the committee has brought that up to the NCUA, and we think the NCUA might move on that, maybe enact a rule or initiate a proposed rule. And when our committee members have been out and about talking to other credit unions in the industry, larger credit unions, they're like, you know what, that would be huge for us too. And I think that's something that's really special about the Small Credit Union Committee, is that they just have a different perspective. But they can be just as effective for all credit unions as well when it comes to advocacy, for
Definitely
sure.
not a wise use of member money there, I don't think.
Right, yeah.
So I always offer final thoughts to my guests.
Okay.
So I'm going to give you, what would you advise? What are your final thoughts to our audience out there?
Final thoughts. Well, if I was speaking to small credit unions, I would tell them, get out of your shops. I know it's hard. If you have just a couple of staff, it can be difficult. But, it's really important to come to events like GAC, to go to your chapter events, your league events, our small credit union conferences, because that's where you learn new ideas from your peers. There are some cool things, like you'll read in the blueprints for small credit union success, that small credit unions are doing to really run awesome organizations and to really serve members in cool and effective ways. And that information is out there. You just got to get out there and learn it from your peers. So stay involved in the credit union community. Yeah, for sure.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for your time here
Yeah,
today.
yeah. Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.